A very pleasant day to each and every one of you. This is Tanuja Raghoo, and welcome to a very special segment. In our studio, we have the honor of having in our company the Brigadier David Granger, who is the leader of the opposition party of Guyana. He's debuting for the very first time on Caribbean Spotlight Television. So, Brigadier Granger, we'd like to give you a warm welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yes, thank you. It's our pleasure, and I'm so excited that your team did contact us and asked to be on the network, and it's our pleasure to have your presence with us. Now, first, tell our community a little bit about the purpose of your visit to New York.
My visit is part of the program of a movement we call Pro-Guyana. It is an inclusionary movement, and we are here this time to broaden the area of, I think, convergence. We would like more Guyanese to understand that we're committed to national unity, regardless of the party they come from and they support, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of the reason for being here in the diaspora. We want them to be part of the movement to change Guyana. That's the most important thing. Secondly, we want to deepen the process of national unity and national development. So it's just not broadening or widening the number of people who are involved in change, but we want to make sure that the democratic change we bring about touches every Guyanese. And certainly, as I always say, half of Guyana is living in North America and half is living in South America. So
very true.
My visit is part of a process of bringing these two halves together.
Okay. Well, as you know, the opposition party is not the favorite party here, especially in the Queens area. But I want you to enlighten the community as what difference is your party making for the Guyanese people at large?
Well, for the first time in the political history of Guyana, we have established something called a Partnership for National Unity, which is really committed to national unity, as the name says. And we are in the National Assembly. We are now 4 parties in a Partnership for National Unity. And never before has there been a coalition of 4 parties. And we are bringing about change because we are committed to the constitutional notion or principle of inclusionary democracy. So we are leading the change that came about on the 28th of November 2011. And it's, again, making history. The first time we have a government, a sitting government that's in the minority. So we have, I wouldn't call it an anomaly, but it's a new situation, and we're inviting Guyanese to take advantage of this opportunity to bring about real change, because we have an opposition that speaks for the majority, and we intend to use that strength, that voting strength in the National Assembly, to make sure that the democratic process is deepened, and it is starting to happen. And it's not a negative force in that we're not trying to prevent the government from governing, but we're trying to ensure that the wishes and the aspirations of the majority of people are given representation in the National Assembly.
Right. Well, you know, the government is saying that you present obstacles for them to make progress for the Guyanese people. What is your stance and your position on that?
Well, we present opportunities, not obstacles. This is because the government, the People's Progressive Party, civic administration, has been there for 22 years. They've always had their own way. They've been able to overrule the opposition because of their voting strength. But now they're forced to negotiate. Now they're forced to submit to our scrutiny. We have been able to establish over the last 2.5 years a situation in the National Assembly where the authority of the National Assembly is superior to that of the executive. The Parliament, the legislative branch, is superior to the executive branch. We make the laws. And I think the executive must understand it must execute the laws made by the legislative branch. That's how it's here in the United States. So we are advancing democracy, not obstructing democracy. And we are committed to scrutinizing government business. We insist that when matters come before the House, that the ministers hold themselves accountable. We insist that government funds are dispersed by the National Assembly and not by any corporate organization created by the government. We insist that the authority of the National Assembly should be maintained. We insist on the integrity of these institutions. So there has been change, because for the first time in 22 years, the government is forced to acknowledge that the National Assembly cannot simply be taken to court and be forced to change Look, for example, at the challenge that was 4 times in 1 year, 4 times in 2012. I was carried before the High Court because every major decision was challenged by the Attorney General.
But why was that?
That is because on each occasion it was felt that the government's right to govern was being challenged. But we have been proven correct. It has been proven that we have the right to disagree with provisions in the budget, not to cut the budget, but to disagree with provisions. And it's happened in 2012, it's happened in 2013, it's happened in 2014. If we do not agree with provisions in the budget, we vote against it. We're not obstructing, but we're forcing the government to conform to proper financial regulations and behavior. So I am confident that at the end of this 10th Parliament, which should end in 2016, Guyana will be better governed. And that will be because of the behavior of the Partnership for National Unity and the Alliance for Change combined. We have to work together. Mr. Ramjatan and I have to work together in order to bring about this change. And that is why the government is afraid of change.
Now, we did ask our community to email us some of their concerns, some of the questions that they would like to hear your responses on. And so I'm going to ask you some of those questions that came our way, because we thought that we should get our community involved in addressing, in having you address whatever concerns and questions that they would have. And the first question that came to us was, what is your position on a government of national unity where the party with the most votes / seats get the presidency and majority of ministries, and other parties get ministries in proportion to the votes they receive?
Well, APNU stands for national unity, so we are committed. In fact, we are the only party that is committed to national unity. PPP has said clearly that they're not interested in coalition, and AFC has said they're not interested in coalition. APNU is the only party in the National Assembly now which is committed to a coalition government. Now, you asked me a question which I will have to ask the PPP. Are they willing to come into a coalition government led by an APNU president? Is the Alliance for Change willing to come into a coalition government led by an APNU president? I am willing to offer them positions, yes. There is no constitutional formula for doing that. But if I became president as head of a national unity government, I will invite PPP and APNU and AFC to come in. Definitely.
Well, we're going to continue with our special interview with Brigadier David Granger, the leader of the opposition party, right after this break. Stay close.
Definitely.
Okay, the other question was, what are your plans to address the high suicide rates in Ghana? Over the last few years, there's been a tremendous surge in suicide, not only within the younger people, but even people that are more mature age are committing suicide. And what is your party doing to address communities?
I do believe this is part of a wider social problem. There are lots of pressures on young people in particular, and there are a lot of economic pressures. We can't run away from that. And I think suicide is concentrated in some areas, some rural communities. And in fact, the new ambassador from Suriname has discussed this matter with me because she's a sociologist, and she conducted research in Western Suriname, which is close to Eastern Guyana. And she looked at similarities in suicide in Western Suriname and in Eastern Guyana, which is the quarantine zone. And I believe that in those rural communities, and there has been a high incidence of the use of herbicides and other chemicals used in agricultural work in both countries. And I think there are some similarities there. What do? We have to solve the social problems affecting these young people. And many of them are related to joblessness. Many of them are relating to poor educational opportunities. We have got dropouts about 7,000 a year from primary and secondary education schools in Guyana. 7,000 children drop out a year. Many of them enter into marital unions of one sort or the other prematurely. They don't have jobs. And I think that has been one of the contributory factors. No one can say for sure why so many young people have been turning to suicide. And it is something that has to be studied. But our plan in APNU is to deal with the social problems, the problems in schools, the problems in the families, to make sure that people have hope. They can look forward to satisfying careers, good jobs, and stable families. It is a problem that will require families as well as government and non-governmental organizations to collaborate. It is not a job just for one agency or even one family or one community. It is becoming a national crisis, although there's a high incidence in certain areas, for example, Blackbush Pole and the Quarantine, and also in the Essequibo Coast. But it is a matter of concern to us.
Well, I am aware that the government has, different workshops like on domestic violence and different outreach programs, and most times domestic violence leads to a lot of suicides as well. So there are some governmental programs that are reaching out to communities to specifically address domestic violence. Does the opposition party have any specific outreach programs or workshops that reach out to the rural areas to really educate the folks there that suicide is not, it should not be the easy way out? There are alternatives. There's help. There facilities in Georgetown or wherever, satellite locations where they can actually go to seek help should they feel that their situation is hopeless.
We were very happy a few years ago when Sri Prakash Gosai was appointed as a coordinator for a sort of national suicide commission. After he died, he wasn't replaced, and we were very disappointed about that. There needs to be a national commission which is working continuously to deal with this problem because it's not going away. And we are prepared to collaborate with such a national commission. We don't have a program of our own, but in our outreach work in those communities, we do work with NGOs which are committed to, and some academic bodies are committed to researching the problem and offering counseling. Well, we don't have a program of our own, but we work with existing programs. But we wish the government would establish a national network, more than a hotline. There must be a commission to deal with it. It's too widespread, and I think that suicides, and there are a lot of failed suicides as well, but it's moving out of the traditional rural agricultural communities into the hinterland. So that is very disturbing.
Okay, now the other question that came our way was, does the PNC have a plan to curb the rising incidences of violent crime in particular and crime in general? Because the consensus is that most of the crime that's committed in Guyana, these criminals are of PNC supporters. So what is your stance on that?
Well, I don't think criminals could be identified by political parties, but our view, and the view that is sustained by my own experience, because I was a member of several commissions dealing with security. I was one stage National Security Advisor. And 10 years ago, in 2004, we presented a report of the Disciplined Forces Commission. And every person who appeared before that commission, I asked one question: what do you feel is the single most important cause of crime? Every person, including Donald Rambatar, who came there as a representative of the People's Progressive Party, every person said narco-trafficking. And I do believe that narco-trafficking is the mother of all crime. And unless we stamp out narco-trafficking, we are not going to deal with other crime. Narco-trafficking promotes gun running, because guns come into the country across the border from Brazil to protect the narco trade. It promotes money laundering. It promotes contraband smuggling. It fosters trafficking in persons. It promotes corruption and graft, because a narco trafficker wants to be able to destroy the confidence or the integrity of the law enforcement agencies, civil servants, the magistracy. So unless we stamp out narco trafficking, we are not going to deal with ordinary crimes. Because where do these guns come from? The gun runners. Where does all this money come from? The narco traffickers. So Guyana, unfortunately, is being sucked more deeply into the international criminal narcotics network. We are now, at the beginning of this year, you would have seen reports about people from the mafia, the Italian mafia, being arrested here in the United States. And there's a Guyanese link. People are exporting narcotics, particularly cocaine from Guyana, and Guyana doesn't produce cocaine, in timber, in achar, in religious objects, in coconut milk, you name it.
They come up with creative ideas and
the
creative
point is
means.
we've got to stop cocaine coming into the country, because once it gets into the country, people will find ways and means of getting it out. Now, I believe that most forms of crime that you find in Guyana, that I mentioned, gun running, money laundering, trafficking in persons, are related to the narco trade. And unless you stamp out the narco trade, you're not going to be able to reestablish law and order in the country. So it is not a PNC problem. It is a national problem of dealing with narco trafficking. And we have made numerous recommendations. There have been 15 separate interventions by the British alone to reform the Guyana Police Force. The Guyana Police Force cannot control 2,500 kilometers of border without aircraft. It has no aircraft. It cannot control or eradicate piracy without boats. It has no ocean-going or coastal vessels that can stamp out piracy. It does not have sufficient all-terrain vehicles. One area alone, the Mazaruni-Kuyuni region, is bigger than the Netherlands. And we have got a tiny police force which just cannot cover the ground. So unless you deal with the police force in a serious way, unless you give them the assets, give them the personnel, give them the resources, ensure that policemen are properly paid, you're not going to be able to have a law enforcement agency which can control that narco trade. So our plan in a partnership for national unity, and up to Wednesday night, we were in the National Assembly, we were talking security. And unless we reform the Guyana Police Force, we're not going to be able to deal with this problem. And the police force has lots of problems. There are problems of torture, there are problems of corruption and graft, there are problems of mismanagement, there are problems of traffic cops, shaking down offenders. And that force has to be reformed. I'm not saying the entire force is a rogue force.
Since you are leader of the opposition party, have you seen any improvements within the force?
No.
Any positive improvements?
No. That is why up to Wednesday night, I had to bring a motion to deal with torture of suspects in the Guyana Police Force. I've seen no improvement. There have been lots of buildings, there have been lots of programs, but I'm not seeing any improvement in the quality of performance of the policemen. No, not at all.
Now, what is the PNC's plan to bring back Georgetown as the Garden City of the Caribbean, rather than it's known as too many, especially folks, Guyanese who are visiting Guyana and they see the piles of garbage that's in Georgetown, especially that Georgetown has now become known as the garbage city. What is the PNC's plan in helping to rejuvenate the beauty of such a beautiful city?
Well, the PNC is part of a partnership now. It doesn't operate in the National Assembly on its own. And APNU, the Partnership for National Unity, has been able to bring 4 new local government bills into the National Assembly, and the President has only approved 3. He only assented to 3, he's not assented to 1. We are looking forward to going into local government elections, last held 20 years ago in 1994. And that is the most important. Most of the existing local bodies, including the 6 municipalities and the 65 neighborhood democratic councils, were elected 20 years ago. Some people have died, some people have migrated, some people have simply stopped going to meetings. That is the first order of business, is to have local government elections. But our viewers here in the diaspora must understand what takes place in the local government system. Right now, the Minister of Local Government has the authority to dismantle any municipality or any neighborhood democratic council if he has just cause. And as a result of that, they've implanted numerous IMCs. These are interim management committees which are appointees of the government. So there is no real local democracy. In the Georgetown municipality, there is a council which is under this control largely of a party that used to be called the Good and Green. I admit that some of them are former members of the PNC.
Right, that's with Mr. Hamilton Green.
Hamilton Green, yes.
Right.
There was a clash between the PPP administration and the Good and Green and the PNC members of the council. And there is a clear case of financial starvation and control. And this is manifested in the clash that is taking place between the mayor and the councillors and the appointee, Ms. Carol Suba, who is appointed by the Minister of Local Government. So what we are seeing is not just a normal city council which has become weak or dysfunctional, what we see is a collision between central government and municipal government. And it should not be that these two entities should be fighting because Georgetown is suffering. What we need is local government elections. What we need is the implementation of those 4 acts that we passed. And what we need is proper funding for the local government bodies, the 6 municipalities, and the 65 neighborhood democratic councils. The solution is not in changing Hamilton Green. The solution is in implementing the law. And the quicker we have local government elections, the quicker people will see a beautified Georgetown.
Well, what they're saying is that the funds are given to Hamilton Green and to City Council, and the funds are being misappropriated in cleaning up the city.
That's not true. The city of Georgetown has expanded many times since the 1970s. Right now it goes all the way up to part of the East Coast and the East Bank. And there's no way, I mean, for example, in Georgetown alone, it costs $1 million a day simply to dispose of garbage. The city council is not authorized to increase its rates and taxes. Buildings have not been re-evaluated for 3 decades. So the city council is starved of cash. Cash is not being handed over to Hamilton Green's city council. There simply is not enough money to run the city. And the city does not have the authority to raise funds without government permission. So we have a situation not only in Georgetown, but also in New Amsterdam and other municipalities. And anywhere you go in Guyana, not just Georgetown, you go to Carriverton, you go to New Amsterdam, you go to Bartica, a beautiful place that I grew up, beautiful regattas, and you'll see garbage. There is a countrywide solid waste management crisis. And maybe Georgetown is the worst, but it is one of...
Well, have they thought of maybe implementing some significant fines for dumping of garbage? Some very strict fines?
The big problem is that the city council is almost like a department of the Ministry of Local Government and Regional Development. It really has no autonomy that you can talk about. That is the problem. The mayor technically is a figurehead. The person who controls the city of Georgetown is the Minister of Local Government and Regional Development. The central government controls the city, and the central government has to accept responsibility for the state of Georgetown. That's my view. And I think that's the view of most people in Georgetown.
Well, we appreciate your perspective on that question. Now, as you know, everyone in the world thinks and is aware that the Republicans in Congress here in America blocks every proposal by President Obama for the sake of opposing, thus making him a lame duck president. Is this the same tactics that is being used in Guyana by the PNC and AFC and APNU against the Ramatar government in regards to the new hospital that they're planning to build, and also in regard to the extension of the Chetty Jagan International Airport projects?
When a Partnership for National Unity was formed only 3 years ago in July 2011, several projects were already on stream. When we got into the National Assembly in January 2012, we started to scrutinize these projects. We started to look for the source of funding. We started to look for transparency. And what we found were situations in which people could not account for the money that was being budgeted. For example, the Mile Falls hydropower project. Up to the present time, there is no bill brought before the National Assembly to explain how this important project would be developed. There's no project office. We recommended the establishment of a Potaro Basin Development Authority. But what came before the National Assembly were 2 bills, one to raise the debt ceiling and one to deal with the reservoir, the area that was likely to be flooded, the environmental concern. But no bill has been brought before us on the Mile Fall hydropower project. We stopped it because we were not satisfied that it was a feasible project. Somebody just drew a straight line through the tropical forest, and they ignored the creeks and mountains and rivers, and up to now the road to the project has not been completed. So we had good reason. So it's not just one project. It's the Mile Fall hydropower project. It's the Atlantic Hotel Incorporated, which is known as the Marriott project. Up to now, the central government cannot disclose the identity of the investors. The specialty hospital project is not for the ordinary people. It is not for primary health care. It is like a health hotel. people from overseas will come to visit.
But don't you think that having a specialty hospital would benefit the people at large,
But
giving better medical care, better surgeries?
we do not disagree with that, but we are looking at priorities. For example, we are not against the Chedijagan, the expansion of the Chedijagan International Airport, but people were given permission to build houses, some have concrete houses, in the area that is going to be affected. And our concern is that those people should be resettled. And in fact, only last week we met with CHEC, China Harbors Engineering, which is doing the project. And they have informed us that some of the soil on which the airport is to be built is not suitable for the weight of the new airport. And Guyana does not even have geophysical engineers who can analyze the data.
Well,
so all I'm saying is that those big projects, the Chedijagan International Airport, the Specialty Hospital, the Atlantic Hotel Incorporated, the Mile Fall Hydropower Project, require the expenditure of billions of dollars. And we ask the government to sit down with the opposition and let us look at our national priorities. For example, a large part of the working population of Georgetown actually lives now on the West Bank. And the only way, or the most efficient way of getting to work in Georgetown is by the bridge. If that bridge breaks, and it has broken for quite a few times, people will not be able to go to work. And we say, well, let us sit down, speak with us, let us look at the project, and let us create a list of priorities. Many of these projects were inherited by the present Ramotha administration from the Jagdeo administration. And some of them are not feasible. And it is our duty not to obstruct, but to ensure that Guyanese population gets value for money. That's what we're doing. The job of any opposition is to scrutinize. We're not blocking or obstructing, but we're making sure that when the Guyanese get a big project like that, costing billions of dollars, it will be a project that we're all satisfied with, and it's not happening at present.
All right, so getting back specifically to the two questions, if the hospital, especially hospital, will benefit the people, your party would support the project? If
we can see that for primary health care, it is going to be a beneficial project, yes, we'll support it.
And now for the expansion of the airport, you know, having more different airlines coming in, JetBlue, some of the major carriers, increasing, you know, more tourism into the country, which would increase the profitability of the country economically. Would you support that
We would
venture?
support it, but there is no evidence that as things stand, Guyana will become that transport hub. There are many problems in Guyana which will not be solved by creating an airport. You will not solve narco trafficking, you will not solve crime, you will not solve the human safety problem, you will not solve the economic problems in Guyana simply by creating an airport. But we are prepared to support it, and we met with the contractors, the China Harbor Engineering Corporation, to discuss that. Right now we are concerned with the human element of resettling people in that area that is going to be affected by the construction of the airport. So it is not an opposition to the airport. We're looking at the governance issues. Let us see the contract, let us see what arrangements there are for financing, let us see the managerial architecture for these projects.
Welcome back to our special program. In our studio is Brigadier David Granger, the leader of the opposition party of Guyana, and he's definitely addressing some very core issues, core concerns, core questions to you, the community. And Mr. Granger, I wanted to ask you specifically, as you know, the government of Ghana is promoting Ghana as a major ecotourism hub. Many families that are going to vacation in Ghana are planning eco tours to the hinterland. What is your stance, your viewpoint on the promotion of ecotourism in Guyana? Do you feel that this is a fast-growing area of tourism, that this will bring in and generate significant revenue for the country?
Exactly. I do believe that, and I do support the drive to promote ecotourism. Guyana is the biggest and it's the best ecotourism destination in the English-speaking Caribbean. I have no doubt about that. Guyana must support its tourist objectives by building better infrastructure. We need better roads and highways, we need bridges, we need better, more reliable aircraft and airdromes in the hinterland. And I do believe that with a program to develop the infrastructure, we'll be able to attract more tourists coming into the hinterland. People need to be trained. We need better hotels and all that. But I do believe the future of tourism in Guyana is in ecotourism. But we have to have the infrastructure in place. Guyana needs to be a safe destination. It needs to be able to guarantee to visitors that they'll get them to the destination safely and back out. It needs to have resources, for example, people speak about Niagara, people speak about Victoria Falls in Africa, and Guyana's got one of the most beautiful falls in the entire world. Guyana, in the Pacaraima region, what we call the Potaro Superuni region, Region 8, you've got beautiful mountains, you've got beautiful waterfalls, beautiful rivers and lakes. And I do believe that the future of Guyana's tourism lies in ecotourism, but we have to develop the infrastructure. And I would support the government's thrust to do that.
Wonderful. Well, they always say we save the best question for the last, right? So it's rumored here in New York, Mr. Granger, that you will not seek re-election as the leader of the PNC at their upcoming Congress in July of 2014. If this is indeed true, how will this affect you as leader of APNU?
Well, it's not true. I do intend to seek re-election because I am engaged in a program for national unity, a program to build the pro-Guyana movement. And I believe that my participation in that movement is essential at this point in time. Right now, we have the best opportunity in the last 20 years to move forward towards national unity. And my visit here to New York is very important because, as I said, it will broaden the scope of the partnership. And I would like to invite people who are members of other parties to be part of the pro-Guyana movement. Stay in your party, stay in the Alliance for Change, stay in the PPP if you want, but let us commit our energies, let us commit our effort, let us commit our resources to advancing national unity. That's why I'm here. Similarly, I want to deepen democracy. I have a deep sense of mission and I have a vision of Guyana. On the 26th of May 2014, we will be celebrating the 40th anniversary of Guyana's independence. 2 years from now, in 2016, we will be looking forward to Guyana becoming 50 years an independent state. Mm-hmm. I want us on that 50th anniversary to look back at a half century of Guyanese development and say, I am a member of a united country, I'm a member of a democratic country, and I'm happy to be Guyanese, I'm happy for my children to go back. Mm-hmm. And when I get old and I want to retire, I want to go back to Guyana.
Yeah.
That is what I want people in the diaspora to feel.
And I'm sure the majority of us feel that way, including me. But the safety is an issue because when families go back to Guyana, they're gunned down, their homes are broken into by bandits with guns, and there's a fear of just existence. We all would want to build this beautiful retirement home in Guyana, but we don't feel safe.
We are now in a position in Guyana in which the government, because of the configuration in the National Assembly, is more obliged to discuss with the opposition. And I'm sure that Mr. Kemrat Ramjatan from the Alliance for Change, and on my part, from the Partnership for National Unity, we have a serious approach to public security and human safety. And if the PPP sat down with the AFC and APNU, we can make greater headway in making sure that Guyana is safe for people to come back. The investors want to be sure that they're putting their money in a safe country. The members of the diaspora who've got relatives in Guyana want to be sure that they wouldn't be attacked when they come home. And we have a clear and well-defined program to make sure that narco-trafficking is brought to a halt, banditry in the hinterland is brought to a halt, piracy, particularly in the Quarantine Coast, is brought to a halt. We have 3 armed robberies every day. Every 8 hours there's an armed robbery in Guyana. It's a serious problem. We want to deal with gun crimes. We want to deal with suicide. We want to deal with all these criminal problems. And I'm confident that if the government, the PPP government, sat down and spoke with the APNU and the AFC, we will be able to make Guyana safer. I am bent on ensuring that when Guyana celebrates that 50th anniversary on the 26th of May 2016, we will all be satisfied in the country of our birth.
Now, there's another question I wanted to ask you. What do you feel is wrong with the current judicial system in Guyana?
Part of the problem has been solved only a month ago. Part of the problem was that they did not have financial independence. And it is only in the budget debate of 2014 that the government agreed to allocate funds directly to the judiciary. Prior to that, the judiciary was treated as part of a system by which it had to apply to the government for its funds. Right now, it has a block allocation, and however the chancellor wants to spend that money, he can spend it. That guarantees independence. They do not feel that they have to go cap in hand and ask the government for money. The Assembly, the National Assembly, has given the judiciary that first right. The second problem, I think, is the amount of the size of the backlog, because of the.
And that's a major problem.
It is a major problem because there were not sufficient magistrates and judges, because of the low emoluments, and we feel that by giving the judiciary greater financial independence, they can pay the magistrates and the judges better, and that will attract a higher quality of persons and more persons to go into the system. So we have taken a giant step for the first time in 20 years of restoring independence to the judiciary, and I believe that we'll get better judgments because we'll have a satisfied judiciary which doesn't have to look over its shoulder to see whether its paymaster is pleased or not. They'll be able to give Guyanese the quality justice we deserve. And there are also other areas that we've now introduced systems of dispute resolution. So some of the cases that used to go for trial can be resolved out of the courts. And some of our lawyers are being trained.
The backlog of the more important cases.
And in addition to that, a lot of the inquests were not being dealt with. As I said before, I was a member of the Disciplined Forces Commission, and we feel that a special coroner's department must be created so that all of these inquests will be taken off of the table from the normal magistrates. They can go about with the ordinary criminal activities, and there's a special department which is dealing with inquests, so that backlog can be cleared, because some people have been killed like during the troubles of the 2000s, and the deaths have never been investigated. Even the former Minister of Agriculture, Saturday Osaw, there's never been an inquest into his death, and he was a minister. So you can see how seriously affected the judicial service was. That the unnatural death, it was certainly executed, I can say that, but the judicial system must be able to investigate that death without direction from the government. So we feel that the action we took even just last month during the budget debate will contribute to the independence of the judiciary.
Great. Well, Mr. Granger, I think you have really addressed many of the concerns that the Guyanese diaspora do have here in New York, and we wish you continued success. I know that you have a lot on your plate, and I think the general consensus here is that, the diaspora here, we want to know that the country, our country of our birth, our homeland is progressing, that the people are having a better quality of life. Minimum wage is going to be increased. People have, food on their table, not have to think about where they're going to find the money to provide the next meal for their families. So there are a lot of concerns here, and as you know, families here are still subsidizing families in Guyana, and because of the lack of jobs, because of the poor economic condition of the country, people are in just fallen states. Suicide rates, lack of jobs, so many things going on. So in closing, I wanted to ask you, what would your message be to the Guyanese people in Guyana and to the diaspora here, that the opposition party is committed in making a difference?
We feel that the results of the elections on the 28th of November 2011 put a nail in the coffin of winner-takes-all politics. We have moved into the era of inclusionary democracy. We've moved into the era of consultative and consensual politics. And the way to go is through partnerships. And I would like to invite all the members of the diaspora to support the movement, the pro-Guyana movement, which is aiming at national unity, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of religious differences, regardless of which geographical area you came from. And by supporting our pro-Guyana movement, we will build a zone of convergence so that all Guyanese can express their views freely and have those views, have those interests taken on board by the government. Once we have a winner-takes-all style government, we will end up with the same situation we had the last 20 or even the last 50 years. But now is the age of inclusionary democracy. Now is the age of coming together, and I'd like to invite all Guyanese, the 50% living in North America and the 50% living in South America, to sit at the table put your differences on the, so that we can discuss them and come together. I would certainly like to leave with Guyanese the vision that when we celebrate our 50th anniversary of independence on the 26th of May 2016, we'll be a happier country. And I think that the road to that happiness lies through the pro-Guyana movement. Regardless of your party, regardless of your ethnicity and your religion, let us get involved in deepening this inclusionary democracy process. That's my message to the diaspora.
Mr. Granger, thank you so much for being on our show.
It's a pleasure.
And all the very best to you and to the opposition party, to APNU, and all the best to the people of Guyana. And we wish our people to be a successful nation, and we look forward to hearing from you again in your next visit to New York.
Thank you, Tanuja.